And of course, obviously, one I guess like his descendants, Darius the Third, right? He's the one that's unfortunately like because of Alexander the Great. That's when like the Achaemenid Empire like pretty much like fell, right?
Correct. Yet Darius the Third was the last king to rule the entire empire. He came to power through semi-legitimate means. He was the great grandson of Darius the Second,
Okay.
and in between those two, there were three different Artaxerxes, uh, and the last two were killed by a courtier named Bagoas, who poisoned them both one after the other, which led to Darius the Third being appointed by him. And when Alexander showed up, he was on really shaky ground in terms of legitimacy, which is probably what led to some very poor decision making during Alexander's initial invasion.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, when Alexander the Great, when he, funny enough, went to Egypt, he was seen as like the liberator of Egypt, right?
Yes, the Egyptians staged a revolt against almost every single Persian king, um, and did not like foreign rule. So when somebody showed up who was going to kick the Persians out, they were ready for it. They surrendered to Alexander without a fight. They accepted him. They named him Pharaoh. But in like the long run of history, it's real hard to tell if they were excited about Alexander personally or if they just thought, well, there's no way he'll be as powerful as the Persians. We can just kick these Greeks out later.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I
then they
mean,
ended up
I
ruled
remember,
by Greeks for 500 years.
yeah. And the funny thing is, I remember it was like Darius the Third, like he pretty much like was telling Alexander the Great, like, hey, you can keep like half the empire, and basically trying to come up with terms, and then Alexander's like, no, I want like the whole thing.
Yeah, I think if Darius had offered a settlement earlier on, Alexander probably would have taken it. But
Yeah,
there's no way that Darius would realistically give up Egypt willingly because it was just so valuable. It produced so much gold and grain.
yeah,
And to get to Egypt, Alexander had to fight him in the field and was so successful in that battle called the Battle of Issus that by the time he faced Darius III on the field again, he had absolutely no doubt in his mind that he was going to win.
and obviously, like from what I've heard, is that Alexander the Great, like, I mean, the Persian Empire was kind of like already like established, and then he kind of like established it again, like in his own way, per se, kind of, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, he conquered the whole thing, one region at a time,
Yeah,
and adopted a lot of the court practices and clothing and ceremony from the Persians. You know, in part because it's not like Greece or Macedon had ever ruled an empire like this before. And everybody who ruled something similar just copied what the Persians did because they had been what defined being a large kingdom for many centuries. So Alexander acted like what he thought an emperor acted like, and that's acting like a Persian, which upset some of his nobility, but there wasn't much they could do about it in practice.
yeah,
Um, but a lot of historians kind of view Alexander as the last Achaemenid in a, you know, at least honorary sense.
yeah. At least like in that, like I guess like fashion that way.
Yeah.
So obviously, like I mean, once like he died, like there were like many like I guess like Persian type of like empires that arose after that. Right?
Yeah. Alexander died, and basically, while his body was still warm, his generals divided up the empire amongst themselves. They officially had his newborn son as a regent and a regent for a few, but within 2 or 3 years, they were fighting each other for control.
Yeah.
The bulk of the empire went to a general named Seleucus, and that forms the Seleucid Empire
Yeah.
that controlled most of what had been Persia, aside from Egypt and bits of modern Turkey. But most of those bits of modern Turkey were actually ruled by minor kingdoms of, or ruled by people of Persian descent.
Okay, okay. And obviously there were like many, even the Parthian Empire, right, which was kind of like somewhat like Persian and Sasanian Empire as well, right?
Yeah, the Parthians are an interesting case. They were steppe nomads. You could lump them in with the idea of Scythians, who
Oh,
invaded the Seleucid Empire a couple of times before taking over most of it. And they adopted a combination of Greek culture and culture from the region of Parthia, where they initially invaded, but they showed a lot of knowledge of the Achaemenids. They took on Achaemenid titles like King of Kings. They took on, some mythology claiming to be related to the Achaemenids. And they ruled until the third century CE, when a dynasty of priest kings who had been like the vassal rulers in Persia proper, like the province of Fars in southern Iran, rose up and usurped the Parthian Empire. They basically just took over the existing thing and made themselves king.
now obviously like there were obviously like a lot of these Persian like empires afterwards, but I mean, unless you like the Achaemenid Empire, which one would you say like probably your favorite to study?
Oh, the Achaemenids are my favorite to study. Um, Partly just because they're really straightforward. There's a lot of drama and there's a lot of mystery, but and are a bit better documented internally than the later ones, partly because they kept records on clay. The time you get around to the Parthians and Sassanids, everything's on paper.
Okay, sense.